Welcome back into the Tell Me series, and this series is Bible questions and answers. Bible questions and answers. Now, here at the Tell Me, we work with approximately 12,800 pastors around the world. And we're constantly receiving questions, and we do this particular session here to answer these specific questions that come from pastors and from other church members, as well as Christians from around the world. Now, this particular question comes from a pastor in the country of Venezuela. In the country of Venezuela, where he was at a university, and he was engaged in a debate with regard to the veracity of the Bible. And he answered, and he sent this question in, and it's a great question, okay? Because people are always questioning the veracity of the Bible. So hear the question very carefully, and of course, this would come from university students. Here's the question: how do the patriarchs' ages make such precise sense mathematically? How do the patriarchs' ages make such sense mathematically, precise sense mathematically? So I want to ask you to open your Bibles to the book of Genesis. And if you compare dates within the lives of Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, and Joseph scattered throughout the book of Genesis, you'll see that these so-called random dates, okay, are perfectly synchronized. Let's have a look. The Bible tells us that Isaac was 60 years old when Jacob was born. We know that because Genesis chapter 25, verse 26 says this: "Afterward, his brother came forth with his hand holding onto Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them." Okay, now Isaac died at 180 years. Jacob was 120 years old when his father passed away. How do we know that? Because Genesis chapter 35 says this in verse 28 and 29. It says, "Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. Isaac breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, an old man of ripe age, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him." This was 10 years before Jacob entered Egypt at the age of 130. How do we know that? Because in Genesis chapter 47, verse 9, it says, "So Jacob said to Pharaoh, 'The years of my sojourning are 130. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life, nor have they attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning.'" This was also the second year of the famine. So Joseph was 39, since 30 plus 7 good years plus 2 bad years equals 39 years. How do we know that? Well, Genesis chapter 41, verse 46 says this: "Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of the Pharaoh and went through all of the land of Egypt." In Genesis 41, drop down to verse 43, and it says this: "When the 7 years of plenty, which had been in the land of Egypt, came to an end," these were the good years. Now drop down to Genesis chapter 45, verse 6. Genesis 45, verse 6 says, "For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting." Now, so you understand, these dates, they synchronize perfectly if we would just slow down and read the scriptures. Now, let's take 130 years minus 39 years equals 91 years. So Jacob was 91 years old when Joseph was born at the end of Jacob's 14-year work contract with Laban. Remember that Jacob had a contract with Laban, right? We remember that? Well, let me take it. Go to Genesis chapter 30, verse 25. Go back there. Look at this. Genesis chapter 30, verse 25. "Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph, and Jacob said to Laban, 'Send me away that I may go to my own place, to my own country.'" Well, now go to Genesis chapter 31, verse 41. He says, "These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. Now, don't get lost in the question. The question is, how do the patriarchs' ages make such precise sense mathematically? Now, since 91 minus 14 equals 77. Jacob was 77 years old, and Isaac therefore was 137 years old when Isaac thought that he was dying and blessed Jacob, who then fled to Haran. Remember that? Isaac believed he was about to die when he was 137 years old, but he didn't have to worry. After all, he lived another 43 years and died at the ripe old age of 180. How do we know that? Well, because Genesis chapter 35, verse 28 says this: Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. So why did he believe he was doomed to die at that age? Well, what we understand is that he was fatalistic. Isaac's older brother, remember Ishmael, had died exactly at the age of 137. How do I know that? Because Genesis chapter 25, verse 17, says this: These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. And Isaac thought that he also would die at that same age. So you need to understand something. Either the author of the book of Genesis carefully worked out all of these scattered dates, intricately interlocked before he began to write, or more likely, these are the actual dates that work out with such precision because they are real. This means that Isaac actually lived 180 years, Ishmael lived 137 years, Jacob lived 147 years, and Joseph lived 110 years, even though most of these ages are well beyond the maximum lifespan of today.